Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm calling this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Honorable members of City Council, in accordance with the Virginia Beach Codes, Section 2-21, and the authority vested in me as the Mayor of Mayor of the City of Virginia Beach, I hereby call for a special session of the Virginia Beach City Council, Thursday, July 23rd, 2020, 7 p.m., Virginia Beach Convention Center, 1000 19th Street. The purpose of this special session is for the City Council to hold a public hearing on the intent to remove or relocate a publicly owned monument at the intersection of Princess Anne Road and North Landing Road. Following the public hearing, the Council may consider action on the publicly owned monument. Citizens may comment either in person or virtually. If you would like to speak in person, please call the City Clerk office at 757-385-4303 to sign up. If you wish to make comments virtually at the public hearing, please follow the two-step process followed below. First, register for the WebEx at https://vbgov.webex.com, and then register with the City Clerk's office by calling 757-385-4303 or via email at abarnes@vbgov.com prior to 5 p.m. on July 23, 2020. This special session will be streamed live on www.vbgov.com and Facebook Live and will be recorded for rebroadcast on cable TV. Citizens are encouraged to submit their comments to City Council prior to the special session via email at citycouncil@vbgov.com. Sincerely, Bobby Dyer. Madam Clerk, do we have all in attendance?
Mayor, all in attendance, excluding Ms. Henley, who has an illness in her family.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we're ready to call the first speaker.
The first speaker is Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner will be Teresa Stanley. If the second speakers can start making their way to the front as well, that may save some time. Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Messner.
Good evening. I signed up early. I didn't think I'd be the first speaker, but welcome again to our new city manager, Mr. Duhaney. And I appreciate this meeting, but I wish there were more discussions about the statue. We shouldn't be deciding whether or not where to relocate it, but whether or not we want to keep it. I definitely want to keep it. The statue did not offend all the groups that are complaining right now. In 2016, 2017, and 2018, I've attended a lot of council meetings. They wanted body cams for the police officers, and they were interested in winning some of the bids. But the bids should be open to everyone. It shouldn't make any difference. There are a lot of people that don't win bids. The statues like the King of Nepotism for tourism offend me. Our lives and safety should not be in jeopardy over statues that don't talk and don't shoot people. Anywhere they're moved will be targeted. People are even targeting in their homes just for speaking. They're taken off of Facebook and Twitter. Okay, we need to fix crime. We need to fully fund our police and give them good pensions and good benefits so they don't have to work second jobs. Crime in all neighborhoods. We need to stop subsidizing any private developers. And before I finish, I want to make sure the statue that offends me the most, and I've fought with other people for 5 years to stop the 31st Street Hotel. the King of Nepotism statue, stop corporate welfare, relocate the King of Nepotism to the bottom of the sea. And we have too many meetings. I just received one 142 today, another special meeting. Everything isn't related to COVID. In the 70s, Democrat Jimmy Carter held a rally at the Confederate statue in Norfolk. And the city requested the local flag runners group to parade at the Veterans Memorial this past Memorial Day and at the second, Building 2, the second anniversary of the mass shooting. They have giant Confederate flags. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meza.
The next speaker is Teresa Stanley, and after Ms. Stanley is
Welcome,
Jamal
Teresa.
Gunn.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and a warm welcome to Virginia Beach new City Manager, Mr. Duhaney. My name is Teresa Stanley, and I'm a resident of Virginia Beach and an active member of the community. I serve on the Beach Partnership as Advocacy Chair for the Interfaith Alliance at the Beach and on the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission. I'm also active in Hands United for Building Bridges, or HUB for short, which is a regional interfaith, interracial group of faith leaders dedicated to racial justice and healing. HUB's membership represents many clergy and faith-based leaders from Virginia Beach and across the region. HUB is currently co-chaired by 3 faith leaders who are serving in congregations in Norfolk, and they've asked me to be the spokesperson for tonight's public hearing. I'm honored to be joined by HUB leader Dr. Riley and several HUB members this evening. I'll now read the letter. With racial justice and healing as core to our mission, Hands United for Building Bridges feels called to join discussions concerning the future of Confederate monuments in our community. In 1900, the Princess Anne Confederate Veterans Camp and the Princess Anne United Daughters of the Confederacy formed for the purpose of erecting a monument to honor their fallen heroes. In 1905, at an elaborate celebration, the 27-foot Princess Anne Confederate Heroes Monument was unveiled in front of what was then the courthouse for Princess Anne County. Even as Confederate monuments pay tribute to war veterans, their strategic placement pointed to motives beyond simply honoring the dead. Many Confederate monuments, like the one in Virginia Beach, were erected at courthouses, places of public trust for equal justice. And like the one in Virginia Beach, many were placed in the same locations that years earlier had served as whipping posts and auction blocks of enslaved persons. In an article by reporter Paul Bebo, it was asserted that the celebration at the unveiling of the monument was more than just an honoring of the dead. For many of the people who gathered at that Princess Anne courthouse on November 15, 1905, for the unveiling of the Confederate monument, it was also a victory celebration for a successful, decades-long effort by white political leaders to disenfranchise blacks and gain power. When we consider the landscape of the time, and when we look at the strategic locations chosen for the placement of Confederate monuments, it is difficult to believe that their original purpose was as simple as homage to fallen heroes. As a faith leader as faith leaders committed to racial healing, we believe that these vestiges to a lost cause must come down. Neither a park nor a plaque can adequately contextualize them while they continue to occupy the spaces where they were erected as towers of intimidation and where they continue to cast a shadow on racial equity and justice. Rather than destroy or hide them from public view, we assert that they should be used as tools for education and understanding and be moved to places where they can be part of a much larger story about our nation's troubling beginnings.
Thank you very much, Teresa.
And you all have a copy of the letter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The
Next speaker.
The next speaker is Jamal Gunn, and after Mr. Gunn is W.H. Agarn.
Thank you very much. My name is Jamal Gunn. I am a member of the City of Virginia Beach City Council. Let me get started. Mr. Mayor, City Council, the other day I was in my car listening to my music on my phone, and the song by Ray Charles, "The Nighttime is the Right Time," played on my phone. Many of you may remember the song from The Cosby Show. It's where I first heard it, when the whole family got together and sung and danced the song for their grandparents or for their anniversary. I vividly remember that scene. I vividly remember Bill Cosby's facial expressions, his mannerism, his physical comedy. He's a treasure for us as black families in America, as he's a treasure for American families overall. But that was 30 years ago. Fast forward 30 years, and we know Bill Cosby, what he has become, a brutal and unrepentant rapist that preyed on women for years and got away with it. And once we learned who he was, we now accepted that it was no longer appropriate to publicly glorify or appreciate him. There's a reason why I told you the story. Keep it in mind as we realize what we're here for, the lost cause of the Confederacy. That is represented by the statue at our municipal center. We have to realize what a lost cause actually is. These statues weren't erected on principles of dignity and loyalty. They were raised as a brutal reminder to my ancestors that we lost a battle, but we are still better than you. They were the ones that actually rewrote history. These statues were the South's attempt to change the narrative of what they actually were, an institution that betrayed their own country with the express goal to not simply maintain an immoral institution of supremacy, but to keep my forefathers as property. And if you cannot regard the Confederacy in their true light and their true history, if you want to honor and revere them like we did with Bill Cosby, and as you keep in mind what he did to those women, keep in mind what the Confederacy fought for. Make no mistake about it. The Confederacy fought and killed Americans to maintain the right to brutalize our American men, rape our American women, and kidnap our American children. That was American slavery. And this is the institution we dare to honor with this statue. It needs to be removed immediately. And frankly, we all should be ashamed of ourselves that we kept it up for as long as we have. In Proverbs 23:7, the Lord said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." That statue is a legacy of a history that perpetuates the lie, the rewritten and changed history of the righteousness of the Confederacy, that forced people like me to think in our hearts that you are better than me, Mr. Mayor. And in my heart, I know in the eyes of God and man, we are equal. My life matters as much as yours. But the legacy left by the Confederacy has constructed a legacy of white supremacy, which in turn produces a complex of black inferiority. That was this country's collective thought for centuries. How can we possibly think our lives matter if we continue to revere those that believe they did not? It's time we deconstruct these symbols of white supremacy. It's time we tell the true history that all men are created equal. Remove that statue. It's the antithesis of who we are as a nation and betrays everything this country has ever stood for.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is W.H. Agarn, and then after Mr. Agarn, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, is Wendy Haslett.
Welcome, sir.
I realize that most of the people in Virginia Beach these days aren't from old Princess Anne County, but there are still some who had ancestors here. Some can count their local ancestry back as far as the records permit, as were some of mine. Many lies and half-truths have been spread about the memorials, but ours was erected in the memory of the men who defended their homes and families against invading armies in Virginia's Second War of Independence. It is the only monument that some of these men have, including some of my ancestors. Among the arguments I've heard lately is that they aren't inclusive, with one detractor saying that his local monument didn't apply to him. But pretty much all monuments, by their very nature, are exclusive. I haven't heard regular Navy divers complain about the SEAL Team monument there at the beach. Inclusiveness these days appears to be very exclusive. The arbiters of it don't tolerate anything that contradicts their opinions. In the current social climate, the courthouse monument is in danger of either being disappeared by the city government or being allowed to be destroyed by the mob. I prefer to see it left alone, and if others want to erect monuments to their own ends, let the new monuments be considered. But the past can't be tolerated unless it conforms to the current narratives. If the only way to preserve it is to move it to someplace where it can be protected and respected, it's Virginia Beach's loss, but perhaps one day sanity will return and its place of honor can be resumed.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Wendy Haslett, and after Ms. Haslett is Dave Cochran.
Welcome.
My name's Wendy Hazlett, and I am the great-great-granddaughter of a Confederate soldier. And I was born and raised here in Virginia Beach. And it's relevant that I'm here tonight to speak for Shenandoah Valley Battlefields to be the holding place, the permanent home, or the permanent home for this Confederate statue, as we are trying to decide its future. Shenandoah Valley Battlefields follows the monument policy, which includes Shenandoah Valley Battlefields considers monuments to be historic in their own right, to be important features on historic, rural, and urban landscape, and to be worthy of protection. If the unfortunate event that a monument to a Union or a Confederate soldier or a Civil War officer or commander, civilians of the period, both enslaved or free, are removed from their original locations, and if said monument is considered relevant to the story of the struggle of the Civil War, Shenandoah Valley Battlefield is open to assisting with appropriate relocation of such monuments to the National Historic District. This statue must be protected and preserved for our children, our next generations. I'm here to protect my children's rights and their freedom of speech. They got a right to be proud of who they are and where they come from. I mean, who were the ones that this statue represents? Princess Anne County, that in 1905, when the former Confederate soldiers and family members were here as the statue was erected, they were showing love and honor for the bravery and sacrifice of our Confederate soldiers. This is a part of American history. Yes, there was a terrible 4-year war. Yes, we had over 200,000 Confederate dead and over 300 United States Army officers and over 200 United States Navy officers resigned and came with Robert E. Lee to fight and defend their family and their home. Mothers and daughters and the sisters, they had to load the wagons. They had to collect and identify our dead, the sons, the fathers, and the brothers. That took many years. They had to care for the wounded. They had to rebuild the South. Finally, they had worked enough and they saved enough money to erect statues and monuments for our dead. Many of the mothers, her sons, were left on the battlefields, in trenches, in mass graves. So the Confederate soldier statue would be their only marker for her son. My family and I take pride, and we honor all American war veterans. I got family that fought and died under the Confederate flag, right? And I got family that fought under the American flag in World War II and the Vietnam War. The Confederate, what happened? Yeah, they always talk about the era when the statues did go up. Let me tell you something.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate your comment.
The next speaker is Dave Cockrum, and after Mr. Cockrum is Mike Hashemi.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank the City of Virginia Beach for hosting this forum tonight. And secondly, I'd like to thank the Black Lives Matter organization and all their supporters for their raised voices, for the people that it's inspired and energized. To the matter at hand, the Confederate monuments. They honor those who fought the wrong fight and for the wrong reasons. These monuments represent values and beliefs that dishonor and disgrace all those who fought the right fight. And that fight being taking the beliefs that this country was founded upon and turning them into a reality. Unfortunately, this fight must still be waged today. These monuments and what they represent cannot withstand faith, they cannot withstand truth, they cannot withstand freedom, and they cannot withstand justice. And without justice, you can have no peace. Simply put, no justice, no peace. Please take it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mike Hashemi, and after Mr. Hashemi is Lawrence McCulley.
Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. So I'd like to have a little history lesson here since we're talking about history. Around the same time the statue was erected, we drafted our state constitution. In that state constitution, we had many flaws in it, including poll taxes, literacy tests, and school segregation. As mentioned earlier, the place where this statue was erected is the same place where we had slave trading going on and abuse. In the 1930s, African Americans at the Virginia Beach oceanfront had to register with the police and be fingerprinted and photographed before they could work for the people down at the oceanfront and the businesses, which they were part of the workforce 95% of. So 95% of the workforce had to register with the police if they were a person of color. During the 1950s to the 1970s, the NAACP filed the most civil suits against one state. It was this Commonwealth of Virginia. Post-Nazi Germany doesn't have any statues with Adolf Hitler or any other Nazi generals in public places. They're in museums. To have a public place with security to show the facts. I do not believe it should be transferred to any private lands. I think we should put it in a museum or melt it and sell it because we could use the funds, as we all know. I'd like to end with a quote from John Lewis. "We are one people with one family. We all live in the same house. And through books, through information, we must find a way to say to people that we must lay down this burden of hate. For hate is too heavy a burden to bear." I yield my time.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Lawrence McCauley. Lawrence McCauley. The next speaker would be Karen Causey. And after Ms. Causey, Tammy Hugate.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Karen, and I've been a resident of Virginia Beach off and on since 1970. I am in favor of the removal of the Confederate Memorial in Virginia Beach because it sits atop a previous slave auction site. 90 years into the formation of the United States of America, we fought brother against brother, North against South, in a brutal civil war. As a nation, we have had a number of moments in our history where choices were made out of fear to keep slavery in the status quo. At inception, we chose slavery even as the founders touted equal rights in the Declaration. At the end of the Civil War, we chose reconciliation over the difficulties and challenges of Reconstruction. During Jim Crow, we suppressed full citizenship, and even now, we still have policies that exact heavy burdens on Black bodies. We have allowed a false narrative to be created within our midst. That narrative lies in the monuments and statues that we have built around the country during the Jim Crow era, the majority of them in the state of Virginia, many of them sitting on previous slave auction sites, covering up the truth. This one here in Virginia Beach is one of them. Do we hold the Confederate soldier above the blood, sweat, and tears of those who were stolen from their families and forced to survive in a faraway land? Black Americans have been the beating heart of this country since its inception. It is their hard work that has built so many of our treasure buildings and universities, and it is their courage that has forced the United States to live up to the words that we put on paper. Without them, there would be no America as we know it today. We are an incredibly young country, and we have so much promise. I ask each of you, what do you want the U.S. to be when she grows up? What do you want Virginia Beach to be? Do we want to cover up our difficult past with monuments like this that rewrite our history? The Declaration and the Constitution are not an ever-shifting standard of conduct. They are the building blocks that we are still trying to live up to, each of us today. I contend that this monument does not belong in our city, and it does not represent our values of integrity, inclusion, and leadership. Each one of us here today bears the burden and the opportunity of shaping our nation's future. We just have to make choices. Do we make those choices with fear, as we have in the past? Or do we make those choices with hope and courage and clarity? I ask that each of you make a choice based on hope for our future as a city, as a state, and as a country. We are all in this together. E pluribus unum, out of many one, the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Tammy Hugate, and after Ms. Hugate will be Brenda Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for having me speaking this evening. I want to start with saying that, we're all here for this agenda to remove all the statues, but it doesn't include all the statues, now does it? It doesn't include the statues of Martin Luther King. It doesn't include the statues of Oprah Winfrey that's been erected, statues of Obama that's been erected. It doesn't include. So let's get this straight. We are here to remove the Confederate statues and replace history as we all know it with a hateful and just uneducated response of it all. I'm not here to say take it down. I'm not here to say leave it. I'm trying to make a proposal because apparently it's, we're not going to do the right thing and remove all statues. We're going to pick and choose. So if you're picking and choosing to mess on a heritage that belongs to so many who have ancestors who fought and died, who fought for what they deemed was a good fight. Now, we all do that. All our military to this day, they go over there and protect them drug fields over and, overseas, all them poppy fields that produce drugs and everything. But them soldiers believe they are there fighting a good fight. So we wouldn't dishonor them, or, well, I guess some people do nowadays. There was a time when it wasn't allowed. I'm asking you all to see it to where these statues get put on a common ground. The Shenandoah battlefields, we have spoke with Norfolk. We're working on getting them removed and put out there. We also have a farm that people are talking about now. We're working on getting things straight. But we definitely have confirmation from the Shenandoah battlefields that they will take it. They want to put a spot to where we can, people who do honor the Confederacy and the soldiers that fought and died, is to put it in a spot where they can go eventually when all the dust settles and to honor their, fallen and to honor their heritage. So I'm asking you to please consider getting these, monuments and statues moved out to the battlefields, moved out to this farm. I have information right here for you. I'm not sure who to give it to, but...
Thank you very much. You can give it to the city clerk right over there by the big screen.
Thank you all for...
Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you. The next speaker is Brenda Smith, and after Ms. Smith is Merrill Rutledge. Thank you. Brenda Smith, Merrill Rutledge, Frank Ernest. Are you Mr. Ernest? No, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. After Mr. Rutledge will be Frank Ernest.
Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? My name is Merle Rutledge. I'm out of Virginia Beach, Virginia. Since I'm a candidate running for governor of Virginia, I cannot give out my address for safety reasons. Anyway, let me begin. Black lives matter, white lives matter, blue lives matter. My life and my history matters, and so does yours. It's called American history, so stop the division. Today is a day that we must put political allegiance to the side and act in a manner that's in the best interest of our country. A patriot story is meant to be told, not ever erased. We are endowed by a creator, regardless of faith, to remember that he created the heavens and the earth. He made no mistake. No one was born into this world to hate anyone, let alone to hate ourselves. People was taught to hate, and what healed us all was to forgive and be reminded of the love for all that still exists. Our history, good or bad, reminds us all that this is possible. One thing that is clear, we are not supposed to give a cookie and not expect for those that try to destroy us not to want a glass of milk. Evil in any manner is never satisfied, no matter how much it attains. We don't negotiate our American history with no kind of criminal or no acts of violence. Dr. King would be firmly against that. History is history, no matter whether you like it, find it repulsive, or offensive. The biggest mistake we make today is destroying any part of history, no matter what it is. It's what made us into a more perfect union. It's what reminds us that we can overcome and persevere. We must remember history that made us who we are, and that is the greatest nation on earth, and God bless America.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Frank Ernest. And after Mr. Ernest will be Jerome Bell.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm a proud citizen of the city of Virginia Beach, and I hope when all this dust settles, I still will be. I want to talk about the hypocrisy and lies that has brought us to this false narrative that we're in. I've worked for years with some other very good Virginian individuals that are concerned about this issue. I don't want to talk about the Confederate monument. I want to talk about war monuments, because the law in Virginia that protected Confederate monuments protected all war monuments. Those who wanted to take down Confederate monuments couldn't do it unless they got the war monument law out of the way, and that's what they did. Here recently, after the first of the year, it was signed in by the governor and went into effect July 1st. But it still somewhat protects war monuments. That's my point. I'm a veteran. I come from a family of veterans, and including Confederate veterans. If you go after one war monument, you can go after all. And it's not, I've said that for years, and so have others, but now it's not my opinion or a forecast. It's true. Look around the country. And let's look at it for a moment, because the Confederate monument, that's just been used as a key to open the door to do what they really want to do. If it was really about the harm of Confederate monuments, then why has this out-of-control mob torn down statues of Abraham Lincoln, attacked the Lincoln Memorial, torn down Frederick Douglass? Do they not know who Frederick Douglass is? But they tore him down. The 54th Massachusetts, runaway slaves, one from here in Norfolk, William Carney, and they attacked that monument. It's an out-of-control, law-breaking mob that's telling people what to do. I saw on the news right here in Virginia Beach where a man said this council should either take the monument down in front of the courthouse, and it's not really in front of the courthouse because that's not an active courthouse. I don't want that to be misconstrued either, but take the Confederate monument down, or it would be torn down like Portsmouth. That's a terroristic threat. I want to live in the city in the United States of America that says we don't give in to terroristic threats. There's no more reason to move that monument than there is the Norwegian lady, the military monuments at Atlantic Avenue, the police monument. You know, we did something else pretty strange here in Virginia Beach that I don't think anybody else did. We tried a woman for being a witch. We even have a road that commemorates that or acknowledges that, Witch Duck Road. I don't want that changed. I like to remember that we have come that far that we don't do that anymore. We should stick with the law, not be pushed by the mob, and leave all our memorials exactly where they are. Because I don't want to be back here in 6 months arguing over the next monument somebody wants down.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Jerome Bell, and after Mr. Bell will be Elizabeth Stewart.
Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members and everyone here tonight. My name is Jerome Bell and I live in Virginia Beach. First of all, let me state that I'm against destroying any statue or monument that tell the history of this country, good or bad. Make no mistake, these removals are about erasing and replacing the terrible history against black people of the racist Democratic Party of the United States, the party of slavery, the KKK, Jim Crow, black laws, and civil rights. They're trying to rewrite history to clear their name. How do I know? It's simple. All you have to do is look at who has the problem with them and who is calling for the solution. Yes, the Democratic Party. They say these monuments hurt people's feelings and is a reminder of hate and oppression. I say it's a reminder of where we can never go again. Even the Jewish people refuse to tear down the gas chambers in Dachau and Auschwitz because they want the reminder, the public reminder of what was done to them to never happen again and to never be forgotten. Because, as we know, out of sight, out of mind. Move them to museums, some say. Next, it would be to change the history books and erase slavery from America like it never existed. Most people don't truly know what the Civil War was fought over. It was not slavery alone. Some may find this surprising because our school system do not teach truths. How do I know this? Because the Emancipation Proclamation of President Lincoln said so, and I quote, "A proclamation whereas on the 22nd day of September in the year of our Lord, 1862, that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1862, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state wherein will be in rebellion against the United States, and henceforth they will be forever free." And since I'm short on time, I'm just going to skip through, all right? And there will be actual freedom. In that statement, though, he was referring to the states that had voted to secede from the Union because they wanted, not only because they wanted to keep slavery, it was about economics of slavery and the political control that the North also wanted of that slavery, states' rights, taxation, and expansion as well. If it was truly about slavery, then the border slave states of Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, and Missouri would have had to free slaves too, but they didn't. Why? Because they did not secede from the Union. Black people as well as white people fought on the side of the Confederate Army, like my great-great-grandfather, Andrew Scott, who was a free man. He fought for F Company in the 47th Alabama Infantry Regiment because he was fighting an enemy who had threatened his home and his family. And if he didn't do that, I may not be here standing talking to you today. Also, for those of you that want to tear down Robert E. Lee statues, here are a few things you must know why I'm against that as well. Robert E. Lee had an exceptional record of military service.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
The next speaker is Elizabeth Stewart, and after Ms. Stewart is Gilbert Garcia.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. One can only assume the meeting tonight is a formality, as there is already a sign on the statue stating it will be removed. Thus, it is important that the hardworking, tax-paying citizens of Virginia Beach gain insight into the groups that our elected officials are allowing to become the driving force behind policy within our city, which includes sweeping changes in educational material in public schools, and even demanding who will be our next chief of police. The founders of these groups describe themselves on video as trained Marxists, and their mission statement supports this with their many objectives, which include, but are not limited to, the destruction of the nuclear family, as found on their website. Surely, as celebrities advocate for murals painted by the taxpayers honoring these peaceful groups, we should hear more about their peaceful activism, which includes burning down small businesses, looting, violent assaults, and even murder by their supporters. In July, 24-year-old Jessica Doty Whitaker was confronted by supporters of these peaceful groups for saying all lives matter. Allegedly, this true statement was the reason she was gunned down. She leaves behind her young son. According to Ohio's WHIO-TV, 2 days ago, a supporter of these peaceful groups was arrested and charged for allegedly kneeling on the neck of a terrified, crying 2-year-old child, while another individual held the child's hands behind his back. They shared a picture of this horrific event on social media while declaring their support of these peaceful groups. NBA celebrities stand with these organizations, telling millions how oppressed they are, while calling on major corporations to donate millions. Millions made from the exploitation of minority groups in China. And yet the peaceful, trained Marxists that supposedly stand against the exploitation of minorities are silent. These are not civil rights movements. They are anti-American movements hoping to divide us. Instead of celebrating the victories we have shared and praying hand in hand over the moments that we could have done better, they seek to distort the truth, perpetuate hate. Instead of celebrating great strides America has made, they take down statues of Frederick Douglass, a black abolitionist. They demand Teddy Roosevelt's statue comes down, the first president to invite a black representative, Booker T. Washington, to the White House for dinner. They are telling you it will not end with Confederate statues. As the great-granddaughter of a brave man that spoke loudly, even while persecuted, against the rise of communism in Poland, I too will not remain silent while the greatest nation on earth is destroyed by an ideology that has been responsible for the deaths of over 100 million. We are Americans, we are fair people, and we stand against evil ideologies seeking to destroy us.
Appreciate it.
The next speaker is Gilbert Garcia, and after Mr. Garcia is Carl Wright.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you. Members of the City Council, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this subject. This whole thing brings forth a lot of passion, a lot of controversy, a lot of yelling back and forth that really doesn't need to be done, actually. In my view, history is history. As the previous speaker said, good, bad, ugly, it's there. We must learn from it. The removal or destruction of Confederate monuments or other historical markers, to me, seems to be an erasure of history, an erasure of who we are, an erasure of who we've become, hopefully for the better. Everybody looks at these monuments and they see some white guy standing there with a musket with a rebel flag yelling, "Yee-haw!" Or, in far too many cases, people who look like you or you. 54th Massachusetts comes to mind. United States colored troops come to mind. You know, you don't see a lot of that, and I wonder why. I see a statue up there at Portsmouth, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and what do I see? I don't see any of you all. I see somebody who looks like me, a Hispanic, because that part of history has been erased. Nobody knows, or very few people know, the contributions that Hispanics did during the Civil War on the Union side, much less the Confederate side. I look at there and I see a young man whose name is Enrique de Jamil, 2nd Texas Mounted Rifles, Company D, Spies and Guides, out of my hometown of El Paso, Texas. He came across, ended up in El Paso, got the war fever in his words, went and fought, became a man they called the Pantera Pelon. It turned out that he was a damn good spy, had a bounty put on his head. I also see Captain Philip Usina. Usina, what did he do? He captained several blockade runners, not just one. So he had to know what he was doing. Also from my home state of Texas, 3 individuals. One of them being the highest ranking Tejano, not Hispanic, Tejano, who I consider myself to be, in the Confederate Army. Santos Benavides, defender of Laredo. 44 troops defeated 200 Federals. The guy knew what he was doing, along with his brothers, Refugio and Cristobal. That's who I see up in those monuments. Those are people whose names you will never hear, even in the Southwest, which is sad. Everybody turns around and says, well, the Confederates are a bunch of racist guys. Well, if they're so racist, how come the Confederate government elevated Colonel Ambrosio Gonzalez to be the chief of artillery to the Department of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, 3 states.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate
We should
it.
not erase these things.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Carl Wright, and after Mr. Wright is Jonathan Kelly.
Welcome, Carl.
Good evening, Virginia Beach City Council, citizens, monument lovers, those that don't care for the monument. My name is Carl Wright. My family has been in Virginia, my dad's side, for over 300 years. 300 years. I mean, I look back to history and I look back over 300 years. And when I was gonna stay at home tonight, because I didn't write a long speech or anything, I had to speak from the heart. And when I think about that and the history in Virginia, I think about all the trials and tribulations, the pain and suffering, the abuse that they went through. And they still served in the military. And they loved this country. And it always bothered me how my uncles, they could go in the military, they could fight for this country, and they would come home and be abused. And they would still tell us, son, this is the greatest country in the world. They couldn't go in restaurants. They couldn't drink out of water fountains. They were discriminated in the military. They were discriminated against outside of the military. Then they had to come home and see statues to remind them of where they were. And I heard people come up here talking about Democrat and Republican. This ain't about Democrat and Republican. This is about what's right and what's wrong. And for me to come up here and have to explain to folks the hurt, the pain, the disrespect, treatment, I commend our young people. It should have been done a long time ago. And I'm not trying to be funny, but you got some folks in here. If I said, well, look, let me go get a great big picture, and don't take this person of O.J. Simpson and put it up there in front of the building, they think I was crazy. But they expect everyone else to accept statues, flags, all these different symbols that remind us of all the hatred and all the uncaring and disrespect that certain groups had to endure. It's wrong. And this is one time I'm proud of Virginia, because they're starting to get it right. This is a great state. So I understand some people don't like change, but that's going to come anyway. So stature shouldn't make a difference to us one way or the other. It's about how we treat each other. You know, if I got to stand up and here and tell you the right thing as adults, that we need to take flags and statues down, to me, I don't know what that says to our children. I want to say to the young people that's saying, let's do the right thing, let's get it right, I commend them. I'm not going to come up here and tell them.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Carl.
The next speaker is Jonathan Kelly.
Good evening.
And after Mr. Kelly is Aidan McLaren.
I'll kind of say this short and sweet. You all know the history of the Confederacy. You guys know they're a bunch of traitors. They fought against America. They are outright traitors. The statue is labeled Heroes of the Confederacy, and having that in front of your city hall doesn't send a good message to your citizens of having heroes of a rebel army sitting in front of your building of law. Makes absolutely no sense. It's illogical and completely repressive. Further than that, I'd have to just say we don't have any Smurfs in this country, so I don't know how Blue Lives Matter.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Aidan McLaren, or McLaren. And then the next speaker will be Patrick Cosgrove.
Welcome.
Thank you. My parents were born in Liberia, in Sierra Leone. Those are the West African countries that the slavers went to and stole and kidnapped my people, possibly my own family members, not ancestors, grandparents. I'm a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute, where for 4 years I had to sit silently and watch my people, my own fellow cadets and my commandant staff salute the statues of slavers that were willing to die in order to enslave my people. I sat silently and I watched my school whitewash history and say that those students died on the field of honor, when really they died trying to continue a criminal enterprise. See, the British, they offered blacks property and their freedom if they fought with the redcoats. And George Washington heard that, and he offered the exact same deal to the blacks if they fought for the Americans. And when they won the war, Washington rescinded the order and put them right back into slavery. Now, you see, I am an American veteran. My father is an American veteran. I'm a second-generation immigrant. My father's a first-generation immigrant, immigrated here from the war-torn country of Sierra Leone. Confederate soldiers are not veterans. They are criminals. Confederate soldiers are not honorable men. They are American traitors. They are men that betrayed our country, betrayed our Constitution, and betrayed our American values. In favor of Confederate values, they would say. See, if the Confederates were alive today, we would call them insurgents. If Confederates were alive today, we would call them terrorists. We would call them human traffickers. To the black man that spoke earlier, understand that some of the grandparents of these Confederate sympathizers would have hung your blue life and my black life from the same tree. You better believe that. I know it's embarrassing and it's shameful for some of y'all to come to terms with the fact that your grandparents were American traitors, but to wave a Confederate flag in a country that does not exist, in a country that stomped out the Confederates, is lying to yourself and lying to our children. The man quoting the Emancipation Proclamation, remember that the last paragraph of the Emancipation Proclamation has nothing to do with freedom, has nothing to do with liberty. It's a promise that Lincoln made to the slave owners, offering them monetary compensation for their loss of slaves. Because the Confederates see us as cattle. They're not veterans, they are not heroes, they are traitors. And we need to take down these statues honoring American traitors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick Cosgrove, and after Mr. Cosgrove is Jeffrey Cannon.
Good evening, sir.
Mayor, Council, it's my first time here. Like most kids, beg your pardon. People who believe that oppression of blacks ended with slavery are either kidding themselves or are just outright liars. And I am a living example of that. I'm the youngest of 5 boys, born to a mom and dad, with my dad being the youngest of 5 in his family. He did not grow up with a father. His father cut out of town when 1929 happened, and my dad was 4 years old. So he had a pretty rough life, didn't have much of anything. But he did, like most of the kids his age, enlist and join the Army, and because he couldn't swim. He didn't want to get in the Navy, and fought in World War II. And when he came back, like most people, got the GI Bill of Rights. That GI Bill of Rights offered those people full tuition at a university of their choosing. My dad was from Illinois at the time and went to the University of Illinois. Got a business degree in Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering. So most people don't know, though, that all the black people who went and fought in World War II, just like my pop, couldn't get the GI Bill of Rights. Why? Universities wouldn't accept people of color at the time. 98% of the people who served faithfully in World War II. So just look at it. My dad had nothing, and in one generation, I get to live on the water over on the other side of town. One generation, he retired on the water. Whereas the thousands and thousands and thousands of black people who faithfully fought for our country do not get that generational uptick. Instead, they get labeled. They get labeled as takers, a la Paul Ryan, who left the Republican Party because he was too moderate, calling makers and takers out in his budget that didn't quite pass, but almost ran us out. So our country takes that right from all those people, but yet we label them the takers. I mean, it's hypocrisy at its finest. So really, I just want to say that Matthew chapter 25, whatever you do to the least of my brothers. And just to be clear, in my country, the favorite country of many people in this room, this is the best country in the world. There's no question about it. But you know what? We have also had great sins, and slavery was absolutely one of them, and we have not done right by it. This is an opportunity. And Mayor, I just got to say, you know, South Carolina, 9 days after the shooting at Emmanuel Baptist, 9 days, the flag was changed, okay? We are lagging behind the rest of the country. The rest of the country gets it.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Jeffrey Cannon. Sir Jeffrey Cannon. Jay Boone. And after Ms. Boone will be Aubrey Jones.
Good evening.
Good evening. We continue to have this conversation year after year, time after time, getting nowhere. It has always been said that we should respect history but acknowledge the pain. There has not been much acknowledgement. There is a reason Hitler is not celebrated in Germany. The Nazis working under his command tortured and killed people. They are not referenced as heroes nor patriots. As it stands, the statue isn't a memorial or education piece, it is honoring treason. I feel there are three options here. Removing it, putting it in a museum, one already built, or putting another statue next to it that is comparable. I would nominate Nat Turner. He was a VA resident and helped to try and free his people from the oppression placed on them. Before anyone questions this, just remember you are only the hero because it is your story and because you have controlled the narrative. If we are going to tell the true story, then it needs to have both sides. And I would like to add, of the three mentioned, Hitler, the Confederacy, and Nat Turner, only one was on the right side of history. Now, if after weighing this option you still feel it is wrong, then you aren't for preserving history. You are for sending a message, one of oppression, savagery, and treason. And to that I respond that that will not stand, your message nor your statue.
Thank you very much.
Aubrey Jones, and after Mr. Jones is Wendell Lundy.
Welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Good evening, good citizens who are on the right side of history amongst us here today. Today, the subject is Virginia Beach Monuments to Confederacy, in which they stand. The first thing that the Confederates did was fire on American troops. There's not a more graphic image you can think of in your head to bring down a statue. I don't know what else is needed. Letting the statue stay up, but locking up protesters in 2020. Let's bring the past to the present and realize what's actually happening right here in the city of Virginia Beach. Norfolk removed the statue within 24 hours. COVID-19 has exposed the hand of the government. So we can see that you can Thanos snap money into existence and put everybody on pause with just a few short days and a few short hours of meetings and greetings. So if we can put forth that same power into taking down these disgusting stains, that would be great. Having compassion and empathy for individuals like India Kager, who was a veteran, who was fired on by Virginia Beach SWAT team in 2015, a story I'm sure you are familiar with. Matthew Russian being locked up, autistic, and doing 10 years of a 50-year sentence for a non-fatal car accident. Things that are going on right now. All you have to do is acknowledge wrongdoings is keen and healing to the community. Removing of the stains, erect statues such as Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, Mr. Cox, V.B. Strong. Heck, you can even put Pharrell up there for his happy song and Something in the Water and the great light that that's brought to Virginia Beach. And whatever it is, let him stay up for 401 years, and then let's revisit the conversation as we're doing right now. The terrible stain of Greek Fest. We have to stop priding yourselves and being a race-free time for tourists to tell racist, and make sure you tell the racist history of Virginia Beach. Trying to sell the history of Virginia Beach as a happy-go-lucky place is not the reality that citizens live with here. Don't you know what I'm saying, don't just stop taking down with the monuments. Make sure that you actually put the Black history into the curriculum here. Make sure you actually do have the resources that we need for the veterans and for the anti-bullying programs and for everything that we need right here in Virginia Beach. And let's also open up the conversation about reparations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Wendell Lundy. Wendell Lundy. Thank you. And then the next speaker is Rabbi Israel Zoberman.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I didn't come with a prepared statement, but I don't need one for this. It's simple. Right is right and wrong is wrong. The Civil War was not a battle over ideals. It was a battle of good versus evil, and thank God good won. And so why we have monuments that honor evil, I'll never understand it. We have to get to the point, we talk about it being history. You have books for history. Open it, read it, remember it, teach it, and don't repeat it. What has anybody learned from looking at a statue? These statues don't even tell you who the person is or what they did. But if you know your history, then you do know, and that's what offends you about the statue. I know that's the case for me. When I see a Robert E. Lee statue, it does something to me. It really does. And so we talk about it being a matter of history and not hate. These men fought for the right to own other people. If I were to do the same thing today, I would be a pariah to society, labeled that, and rightfully so. We're fighting a battle now, trying to find missing kids that are popping up missing everywhere, and there's this big human trafficking thing going on. When we build monuments to these people, when we find these people, when we find the people that are taking these kids off the street, are we going to memorialize them? No, because they're terrorists, because they tore apart communities and families. We will never get to know what West Africa could have been because of slavery. That's a part of the discussion that never gets had. We talk about where we're at as a community today. Most Black communities are considered the hood, the ghetto, low income, undereducated, underserviced. But we haven't had a chance to see what we could do without a heavy hand being placed on us, without a knee being on our neck. So, and I say this to everybody who, because when it comes to politics, there's this stereotype that Black people want free stuff. No, 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 no. We want to be left alone with the opportunity to prosper like everybody else is. That right to pursuit of happiness, that's what we want, and we want it equally. And so bringing down these statues, it's not going to do that. No, no, no. It won't bring equality. But it will make it to where somebody like myself doesn't come to Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Portsmouth and see something that makes your blood boil. Because these statues are not history. They're called monuments for a reason. Monuments are given to honor. These are not statues of history. Nobody's going up to these statues and learning anything. They're honoring these people.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Rabbi.
Good evening, Rabbi.
I'm sorry, so after Rabbi Zoberman, it'll be Rick Klobuchar.
Dear friends, I truly stand before you and with you, trembling, knowing the weight of the issues. This is a very serious gathering, my friends. God and history are looking down upon us. I'm a proud member of the Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission, which sent a letter of support of relocating the statue to this honored city council. We all urgently need the divine blessings of Shalom's healing, hope, and harmony at this historic crossroads of both challenging danger and opportunity. The statue we face and we are pressed to confront at this trying national context is of a Confederate soldier standing guard alone and lonely for over a century. To some, it represents precious family memories, and to others, it is a bitter reminder of the nightmare of slavery and the Jim Crow legacy of abuse, which is not fully over yet, though strides forward have been made, thank God. The statue, however, is surely a controversial relic to a painful and divisive American past that we are pledged to overcome, together creating a more perfect union. And we dare do no less than that. Let it safely rest in a cemetery, museum, or battlefield, not as a subject of adoration, which a private setting might evoke, but rather as an object for study, soul-searching, and warning for our generation and generations to come. Let us properly acknowledge it's long overdue with a dignified plaque designation that within few feet from the statue flourished the abomination of a slave market where the divine image in humanity was violated time and again. And tears, no doubt, still flow. When I stand there, I feel them hovering above me. Our shared God of love and compassion, justice and truth, is still inconsolably crying. Let us move from confrontation to conversation as soon as we can, and duel to dialogue. I address our beloved community and beyond as a member of the Holocaust surviving remnant of European Jewry. I stand before you with the weight of suffering of the Jewish people. We shall yet...
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
God bless.
Thank you.
Rick Klobuchar, and then after Mr. Klobuchar is Ian Lehotch.
Welcome.
Excuse me, but I don't know where people have been. Ultraviolet. First of all, I'd like to thank the members of City Council for selecting me to be the newest member of the Historic Preservation Commission. So thank you very much for that. I have to ask ourselves, why are we here today? And I believe we're here today by virtue of the fact that we've had a perfect storm. We've had a perfect storm of a pandemic, a race riot, economic downturn, and let's admit it, we wouldn't be here today talking about this monument if it weren't for all three of those. Now, I grew up in Chicago, and honestly, I can't even go back to my own neighborhood, and it's very, very sad. It's very, very sad here, too, to see what we've had in terms of demonstrations, assault on the police, and assault on basically at our history and our common sense, like that. I'm all for history, and I'm all for y'all making the right decision. But let me just ask one thing. Whatever decision you make, don't make it out of fear. Don't make it because you've got a threat of violence hanging over you. Make the decision because it's going to be the right decision for us and for our country. Look at what's happening like that. We've got statues being torn down in Washington, D.C., Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln Memorial, George Washington, U.S. Grant. Not only that, but of course, many of the Confederate monuments too. So let's remember, as all part of common human decency here, that the soldiers who fought in the Confederacy, by law, they are American veterans now too. Okay. And I had the privilege of serving in the military. I have the very distinct pleasure of being able to serve on the Historic Preservation Commission. And I have had the chance to talk to all of you. Make the right decision, but make it all for the right reasons. And I'll tell you what, I think victory would be here. I think victory would be really good if both sides of this argument, the ones that say tear it down, the ones that say preserve it, can come all together and be catalyzed by City Council and shake hands, it would be a wonderful photographic moment. And I'm standing ready to help you with the organizations that I represent to be able to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Welcome.
The next speaker is Ian Lehotch, and then after that is Mary Richardson.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you guys hear me? Good evening, Mayor Dyer, members of City Council, Mr. Dehaney. I hope you're settling in well. My name is Ian Lehotch. I'm currently a student at Hampden City College, where I study public history, primarily historic preservation. And when I looked at the resolution this evening, I saw that we're talking about two things, relocation and removal. And while I agree to those to some extent, I believe we need to be focusing on recontextualization primarily. And for that, we need to start with the election in Princess Anne County in 1878, where the black vote was suppressed when African Americans had to vote through a 7-foot wall where they couldn't see where their ballots went. And after the election ended and the good old boys remained in power, Mr. Willis Hodges, who was an African American politician at the time, created a big fuss. And shortly after that, he was brought up on charges that were false, and he was given the option of going to prison or leaving the state for good. Now, what I would like to see is a statue built honoring Mr. Hodges and the service he made to Princess Anne County, but also the state of Virginia, and that's because Mr. Hodges was actually one of the 24 African Americans at the Constitutional Convention for Virginia after the Civil War. And he actually helped create Article 8 of our Virginia Constitution, in which established the public schools that we have today. He also was a Princess Anne County councilman. He was a Princess Anne County judge. He once owned an abolitionist newspaper in New York. He also was the first African American lighthouse keeper of the Cape Henry Lighthouse, which is on our city seal, a man that deserves to be memorialized. And actually, one of the gentlemen that forced Mr. Hodges out of town after the election of 1878 was an O.B. Mears. Now, Mr. O.B. Mears was one of the chief fundraisers for the Princess Anne Confederate Monument. So I think it would only be proper and tell a real narrative, a real historic narrative, or proper historic narrative, that we build a statue to Mr. Hodges while also putting up the interpretation of what the current statue there was. It was a statue that helped institutionalize Jim Crow and racism, but also imagine a location, a historical exhibit of sorts, in which every VBCPS student could go and learn about Jim Crow, learn about racism in Princess Anne County, someplace where also we could point at the steps of the Princess Anne County Courthouse and say people were sold into slavery there. When we talk about slavery, I feel like often it gets whitewashed in the textbook pages, but it's a whole different thing when you're sitting there looking at a physical location and saying, because Mr. Hodges, the man in that statue, stood against those people being sold into slavery because of the color of their skin, those people that built that statue forced him out of the state in which he helped write their Constitution. I think that is the historical narrative that we should push for and the end result that we should push for. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Mary Richardson, and after Ms. Richardson is Mike Armstead. Are you Ms. Richardson? Oh, I apologize.
Welcome.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity of being here. Tonight I've heard several things that are of interest to me about families being here for over 300 years, traders, and I would like to say that my family has been here over 300 years, and they were traders too. And if they had not been, we would not have this meeting. We would not have the right to free speech or freedom of and from religion. They were traders, and they fought for their freedom, and they were sold by their own. As far as the Confederacy is concerned, many Scots-Irish of Southern descent have a real aversion to a strong central authority because they suffered under it from the British. I think it's sad that we dwell on the past, I'd like to see us move in a more positive way toward the future instead of fighting it all over again. I don't think any one of us in this room is a victim. My mother said I was descended from strong people who were survivors. And I think every one of us in this room is a survivor who is descended from strong people, and I hope we have learned from the past and now can focus on the future and making it better for everybody. And a monument is the least of my concerns.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mike Armistead. After Mr. Armistead is Hannah Nicole Merck.
Good evening.
There's been a lot of talk back and forth about the monument and slavery and why it's there and racism and the problem is that the monument is not there to represent racism. There was a war that was fought between men who believed that the Union was perpetual and had to go on forever, and men that thought that they could leave when they wanted to. When this war started, there were 7 states that had slaves that left. That left 8 states that were still in the Union. The president had no problem with that whatsoever. 8 versus 7. What happened was he declared he wanted 75,000 troops to invade the South, and that lost 4 more states. Virginia, where we live, did not want to leave the Union whatsoever. They voted to stay in until that happened. When that happened, they voted to leave. Very simple history lesson. Before Lincoln was inaugurated, there was a 13th Amendment proposed, passed in the state legislatures of the whole country, minus 07. It was called the Corwin Amendment. The 13th Amendment would make slavery perpetual. All they had 7 had to do was come back, but they didn't come back. So it couldn't be that slavery question. Washington, D.C. had slaves up until 1862, a year into the war, when Lincoln decided to pass a bill for $1 million to buy them for $300 a piece, plus give them $100 to free people if they would leave the country. The state of West Virginia was started in 1863, 2 years into the war, as a slave state, bringing that total of slave states in the Union up to 5. So it's not a slave question. It's a monument question of a memorial. There were slavers that fought for the Union and less than 10% that fought for the South. These men, it was a real war, not a movie war. These men charged into cannon fire with double canister that they were trying to get to that line from both sides. These men fought, they just had coffee the morning before, and now these guys are running into cannons, and there's a mist of blood flowing back in arms and legs and slippery blood. These guys are charging over into these cannons. They didn't do that for slavery. They did that for their state and country. They didn't come back. These ladies were here, leftover widows, girlfriends, both mothers, daughters were left here. And what did they have? Nothing to return to. They never came back. These ladies worked hard for year after year after year to put up these memorials for these brothers that never returned. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mike Armistead. Is that him? Hannah Nicole Merck. Sorry. Then after Mrs. Merck is Michelle Dovey.
Welcome.
I did not come prepared. I will speak.
Could you get a little closer to the microphone,
A little
please?
closer, of course, yes. I too am a victim of idiocracy this last 4 years. I will speak on behalf for my fiance, Michael Cullen Longman, who passed 2 years ago. He was the first Caucasian bused into an all African American school. Michael came from a poor family, as Stonewall came from a poor family as well. Stonewall was bullied growing up as a youngster. He continued his education. He moved on in spite of bullying to become a professor of philosophy as well as artillery instructor and professor. In spite of all of the bullying, because of his mother and father so poor, he continued his education. And this says something about human integrity in spite of the bullying tactics. The era that he was raised in, unfortunately, these issues were going on. My prayers go out to George Floyd and the intelligence community, the mistakes that are made. I think that we should learn from history to not repeat them. This statue is one that can be learned from as well as bullying, and he went on to also fight for the Mexican and American War, and also for his economic issues. Coming from a very poor background, he continued his education. There are economic poor in all countries, and they overcome issues. And the vandalism to businesses and swastikas in front of synagogues and the idiocracy of moving so many statues when sometimes some of them have a deeper history. I believe that wherever, maybe the museum, if they do have to move him, but I think that he would be good staying where he is and to learn from history so we do not repeat it. Due to the battles that this statue and the history that's deeper that he fought and overcame in spite of bullying. Continuing education and the VMI that a gentleman announced earlier, the Virginia Military Institute. Stonewall was an instructor there, and this is essential to our Virginia military as well as other countries and military institutes. So he has a deeper history. It's not only one of hate, but it's one overcoming as well. I am a victim of many idiocracy issues over the last 4 years, and I am remaining strong through the Catholic community. However, I'm in favor of him staying and learning from history. Thank you. Have a good night.
The next speaker is Michelle Dovey. After Ms. Dovey is Andrew Jackson.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time. First and foremost, I want to honor the sacred land of the indigenous peoples on which we have gathered, because I doubt that has been done yet. I wasn't going to speak this evening, but what is the phrase? The Spirit moved me, so here we go. There's been a lot of talk tonight about the erasing of history. So if you want to talk about erasing history, let's talk about why these Confederate statues were built in the first place. They were put up during Jim Crow, the age of time that took place in this country immediately after the Civil War, right? They were put up in order to intimidate and bully Black people into behaving. Let's talk about how police were originally formed They were formed in order to return escaped slaves to their masters. Let's talk about Black Wall Street, how we're never taught that in school. Let's talk about the Black community that used to reside in what is now known as Central Park and was bulldozed. We're not taught that in school, so history is already being erased. We must change our education standards to include the entire story, not just this whitewashed version of it that we are spoon-fed from childhood. Removing these hateful statues is the bare minimum of performative gestures that this country, which still refuses to acknowledge or apologize for slavery or the continued oppression of Black and brown people, can do. They must come down. That is the very least. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Andrew Jackson, and after Mr. Jackson is Al Henley.
Welcome, Andrew.
Mayor, City Council, and our new City Manager. Welcome. I think Mr. Stiles is here. Everybody's here. Good evening to you. My name is Andrew Jackson. Most of you know. I've been in this area since 1956. I've been a permanent resident of Virginia Beach since 1975. I am a retired military person, served from the end of Korea to the end of Vietnam. And in these 82 years that I've lived, I've seen some things. So when people want to talk history, I can talk history. Tonight feels like my city, indeed the nation, stands on knife's edge. The ugliness of racism and devastation of a virus that has killed way too many of our brother and sister citizens has brought me home, at least me, for something of our self-understanding as Americans has fundamentally been shaken. So here we are tonight concerned about statues of those that have upheaved our country because of tariffs and money, the great majority made off the backs and blood of slavery. In my mind, treasonous. I've heard some say, tough questions, tough decisions. To that I ask the question, what symbols from our past must be reconsidered and simply discarded? I ask the question, what stories demand not just a complete answer, but an honest retelling? How should history be taught, especially to our children? What should our history books tell in the story? I would say our true history has strayed and been stolen by many lies. The story, perhaps most misunderstood, the event in the history of the United States, and ironically, the one most Americans believe they fully comprehend. It's called the Civil War. Using contemporary values to judge the moral failings and atrocities of ancestors and to reevaluate the lives and legacies of canonized leaders has become an explosive calculus. Around the globe, a growing number of nations seem ready to embrace the moral deconstruction of our past. Just understand and see it improve in the present. The removal of monuments and symbols to a racist past is an important step to a more just future. It should happen as a precursor to overdue structural reform. If we are honest with ourselves, we will admit that our current climate has unleashed howling beneath system tumult back to the 1960s. A version of America is dying. We hear it, we hear the death rattle, the loud, the violent. These statues, put there only to remind and intimidate, are a terrible and hateful history that must go. A new America is desperately trying to be born. We are the midwives. We have the duty and responsibility.
Thank you very much, sir.
To bring America home.
The next speaker is Al Henley, and then once Mr. Henley's comments have concluded, we'll move to the WebEx speakers.
Welcome.
Mayor Dyer, ladies and gentlemen of City Council, good evening. My name is Al Henley, and I'm a lifelong resident of the City of Virginia Beach. I come here tonight as a representative of a nonprofit organization who is very interested in obtaining possession of this monument. It will be, if it's granted, if approved, would be relocated at the southern portion of the city of Virginia Beach on private property. We believe it's a win-win situation for both parties. Thank you very much.
Mayor, the remaining speakers are virtual via WebEx. The first speaker is Shakita Jackson. Actually, I don't see her registered. Ms. Jackson, are you in the audience by chance? I don't see her registered on WebEx, so let's go to the next one. Kermit Mangrum. And Mr. Mangrum, if you could pause for 3 seconds before beginning your comments to ensure the members of City Council can hear all of your comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kermit Mangrum. I live in the Rose Hall District number 3. I would like to express my opinion on the statue at the old courthouse in Virginia Beach. The statue at the courthouse must be removed from public property. I shouldn't have to remind anyone that the Confederacy took up arms against the United States. Everyone here knows that these people are not heroes. They are only traitors, nothing more. We must be the only country in history to erect statues to the enemies and victimizers of the country and their citizens. This is wrong, plain and simple, and any good Christian would know that automatically without me telling them. There's no reason for this meeting. Each one of you, from the mayor on down, knows what the right thing to do is. Remove the statue immediately to the garbage can of history. Traitors, murderers, kidnappers, and rapists deserve no honor. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jerome Cooper. Mr. Cooper, if you could please pause for 3 seconds before beginning your comments.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jerome Cooper. I'm a Virginia Beach resident, lived here all my life. Admittedly, I don't have too much prepared. I just kind of want to talk about like erasing history for a little bit. And I'll start with just my name. My name is Jerome Cooper. That name did not come from any African countries. Many of the Black people in this country, we owe our heritage to our ancestors who were brought over as slaves to build this country's economy from the ground up. They came here with with names from their African countries, speaking languages from their African countries, with culture from their African countries, history, and heritage. But their history was erased, their heritage was destroyed, and it was hate that did it. It was the hate of white supremacists who fought in the Confederacy to keep them enslaved, to keep them oppressed, and to keep this system, this white supremacist system, in power. I think this statue needs to go. I feel like there shouldn't even really be an argument about it, like it should have happened a long time ago, but better late than never. I yield the rest of my time.
The next speaker is Tess Amarasu. If you would pause 3 seconds before beginning your comments. Tess Amarasu, if you would begin your comments. We'll move to the next speaker as we unmuted Ms. Amarasu, but she was unable to speak before we could hear her. The next speaker is Tahira Managram.
Hello everyone, my name is Tahira Mangrum. I live in the Rose Hall District number 3. I would like to express my opinion on the statue at the courthouse in Virginia Beach. The Confederate statue is degrading and wrong, and I would like to have it removed immediately. Thank you.
The next virtual speaker is Malik Managram.
Good evening. I am Avita Mangram and I live in Virginia Beach. The Confederate monument must be removed. We should no longer celebrate a racist past. Thank you.
Mayor and members of council, that is all the speakers that have signed up.
Okay, at this point, Vice Mayor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Passing around a resolution, and Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move adoption of the following resolution. It's a resolution directing the removal and storage of the Princess Anne County Confederate Monument and solicitation of possible relocation sites. Whereas the Princess Anne County Confederate Monument was erected in 1905 near what was then the Princess Anne County Courthouse at the intersection of Princess Anne Road and North Landing Road. Whereas the monument, which consists of a statue, pedestal, and base, is viewed by many as a divisive reminder of a painful past, and the City Council has concluded that the public property of the city's municipal center is not the proper place for the monument. Whereas in accordance with Virginia Code Section 15.2-1812, the city on June 21st, 2020, caused to be published a public notice of the intent to remove or relocate the monument, and of a public hearing on July 23rd, 2020 on the removal or relocation of the monument, and interested citizens were advised that they could appear in person at the public hearing or provide written comments to the City Council in advance of the hearing. Whereas, having held that hearing, it is a consensus of the City Council that the monument should be relocated, and whereas a site on private property in the southern part of the city has been identified as a possible relocation site, but in accordance with the requirements of Virginia Code Section 15.2-1812, before a final decision is made on the site to which the monument could be relocated, the City Council desires to solicit interest from any museum, historical society, government, or military battlefield. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Virginia Beach that 1, the city manager shall promptly solicit proposals from museums, historical societies, governments, and military battlefields as a potential relocation site, and 30 days after such solicitations, staff shall review any such proposals and provide the council with an analysis of the merits of such proposals. 2, the city manager shall 1, cause the immediate removal and secure storage of the statue while staff solicits those entities for relocation proposals. 2, take steps to protect the structural integrity of the pedestal and base once the statue is removed. And 3, ensure that the box of items placed in the base in 1904 is preserved and provided to the appropriate city staff for care and conservation. 3, the city manager is authorized to transfer funds from existing appropriations to pay for any expenses necessary to remove and store all parts of the monument. 4, the city manager shall direct staff to complete the steps necessary to obtain a certificate of appropriateness for the permanent removal of the monument from its present site. 5, that the city attorney shall prepare the appropriate agenda item to designate the relocation site of the monument and shall take steps to include that item on the council's agenda promptly, but no sooner than 30 days after the city manager solicits the proposals detailed above. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a second? Okay, that we have a second. Open for discussion. Don't forget, hit the right button to get the green light if you'd like to speak. There being no discussion, Madam Clerk, we are ready for to poll the City Council.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berlucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley? She's here. Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved the resolution.
Okay, thank. Just wanted the opportunity to thank everyone for their not only their participation, but their civility and mutual respect in a difficult discussion. You know, we just wanted to let you know that how much we appreciate the public input and that we will take the appropriate steps going forward. At this point, we are adjourned. Thank you.